Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's the CJ. Time for another quick reef update. I was doing a little maintenance today, emptying my skimmer, replacing the filter flaws, getting ready to clean the algae scrubber. And I figured, I'll go ahead and whip out the camera and get some footage for you guys. So for anyone new, I'm using the normal filter flaws that you get, from Walmart or any of those kind of places. Now, I made a video on this earlier in the year when I spoke about, potentially nuking my tank using some unsafe filter floss. So I figured I would retouch on that subject. Now, keep in mind, what I did decide to use is going to be filter floss made by aquarium manufacturers, meaning, stuff that's really made for fish tanks. Now, of course, you can risk it, and always, hey, to each is your own. If you think it's worth it to go ahead and buy some from Walmart or the normal pillow stuffing, sometimes those things have chemicals or the way they're manufactured that could be bad for your tank. So just kind of a FYI to throw that out there. But in a nutshell, mechanical filtration, very, very important to my reef tank. Some people choose to use it, some people don't. But in my situation, I got a small water volume and I do my best to try to keep it clean. It really helps catch any of the particles, leftover food, any of that stuff from getting back in my rear sump compartment, breaking down and causing nitrate, phosphate issues. Not to mention, water change day, this definitely pays huge dividends. When I turn up the pump, blow everything out with the turkey baster and try to remove all the detritus from my tank, without some good filter floss catching everything as it goes through the overflows, it would pretty much make that a moot point. So figured I'd throw it out there. Mechanical filtration, replacing this stuff every few days, whenever it needs it, is definitely one of the keys to my reef tank staying as clean as it does. So let's take a look at the algae scrubber. So for anyone new to my channel, I've been running this nano algae scrubber in my system for, I would say, roughly 4.5, 5 months at this point. And, so far, so good. I say roughly 3.5 weeks ago or so, I decided to take all the phosphate media out of my tank, meaning I took my reactor offline, removed all the phosguard, and I'm basically depending on this algae scrubber, my skimmer, Seachem's pond matrix, Seachem's carbon, and water changes to maintain my phosphates and nitrates in my system. So far, like I said, doing fantastic. Now, this is 3 weeks of growth. I cleaned this thing out, it's completely clean, and this is all the growth I've gotten since then. And as you can tell, I got a few different colors of algae in there. Usually with phosphates in your tank and algae scrubbers, the darker the color algae, the more phosphates, and the lighter it is, the less phosphates. It's kind of a visual thing that you can't miss and you can't mess up. Now, usually the best indicator for me to clean this thing is basically looking at it. Is it floating or not? This normally stays submerged, but once that box gets full of algae and things start getting kind of cluttered in there, it'll actually start to float. As you can tell, it's floating, so it's time to go ahead and get this thing cleaned out. So whenever it's time to clean the scrubber, I usually try to coordinate it with my water change day. There's really one main reason for it. I don't want to contaminate anything. You keep in mind, just like any other filtration in your tank, you don't want to use tap water to clean it. You're going to kill any bacteria and kill off anything that's helpful or useful for your tank. And it's the same way with this scrubber. Now, another thing I do is I make sure that I focus on the LED first. Got to keep that thing clean because that's pretty much the light source and the food source for the algae growing in this box. So I definitely focus on that. And I do have a question that a few people have asked me, regarding copepods and this algae scrubber. Now, a huge refugium, Cheeto, and all of that, I think will be the way to go if you're trying to grow copepods for some kind of food source. In my opinion, this algae scrubber is not going to do the best. The main reason is because of how thoroughly you have to clean it. As you can tell, by the time I'm done, there's not much algae left in here. So if there was copepods or any kind of life in this algae scrubber, I'm going to lose most of it anytime I clean it. So for that reason alone, I really wouldn't depend on this for that purpose. Not to mention, my tank is really kind of void of pods or anything anyways. The Wrasses do a good job of, pretty much eliminating that from my tank. So I really wouldn't depend on it from that. But other than that, pretty easy. Get in here, scrub it, clean as I can get it. Not to where it's completely white, but get all the longer hairs and longer algae that's in the box out of the box and get it ready for the next, 2 or 3 weeks of growth. So algae scrubber maintenance, 101, it doesn't get much easier than this. So this is what it looks like when a leather core is literally being sucked into the rear compartment of your tank. And for anyone that's new to these JBJs, they actually have 3 holes in the back wall. I believe they serve 2 purposes. The first being a pressure release to, to stop the acrylic wall from bowing. And then the second reason, it keeps the pumps from running dry. And for those 2 reasons, I've opted to not plug these holes. but you got to be aware of them. You know, when stuff like this happens, and to be honest, I try to avoid this from happening, but this leather coral is on its way out of my system, so I just kind of have it temporarily on the sandbed in the rear of the tank. And unfortunately, you know, it was almost a casualty. As you can tell, I'll say at least 3 or 4 inches of this leather core had gotten sucked into the rear compartment, and it wasn't happy about it. So, you know, get my hands in there, pull it free, and I'm gonna move it over to the right side of the tank until I get time to trade it in. So as far as maintenance goes on my tank, you know, the way I have things set up, it's fairly easy. You know, the most frequent thing I gotta check is gonna be the filter flows, of course, you know, every 2 or 3 days. Followed by my skimmer cup. I usually gotta clean and replace that every week or so. And then of course the algae scrubber and water changes. You know, besides those 3 things, that's pretty much maintenance in a nutshell on my reef. So with all that being said, let me follow up on the issue I shared a few weeks ago with you guys. Of course, my live stream viewers, you already know what I'm talking about. But for those new, I did have a Bryopsis issue in my reef tank. And believe me, that's not something you want to deal with or at least let get out of hand. And luckily in my situation, I was able to get on top of it before it did. Basically, it was growing in a few patches of GSP on top of my tank. And in a nutshell, manual removal, you know, cutting out that GSP and keeping that Bryopsis from getting a foothold has, you know, at this point, I would say it's safe to say I've defeated the Bryopsis algae. Have not seen it return, have not had to do any maintenance or removal since then. And it's going on 3 or 4 weeks at this point. So I'm feeling pretty good about my chances, and I think, you know, the worst is behind me as far as the Bryopsis goes. So when it comes to any other pest, you know, nuisance algae, flatworms, nudibranches, any of the other crap that, you know, eat your corals and pretty much destroys your reef tank, you know, I would say I'm pretty happy with where I am. In the whole 1.5 years, almost 2 years of this tank's life, I've been able to avoid those pests. You know, I call it a little luck mixed with a strict regiment when it comes to dipping my corals. You know, I didn't cut any corners. I inspected corals, made sure I purchased from, you know, one place that I trusted, didn't mix and match too many corals. And of course, you know, if something I didn't like, I snipped it off and just did my homework as far as trying to make sure that I kept my tank pest free. And so far, so good. So really happy with where I am as far as the coral placement and the way the corals are growing. And, you know, a few places that I'm gonna still have to fill in with a few different corals, but overall, really happy with how the tank's maturing and how things are growing in. So when it comes to any other stock list changes, not sure yet. Invertebrates are gonna add some more of them. Still plan on adding a few more corals, but so far, just letting the tank, you know, stay in neutral and letting things maintain themselves. Now, there is one more thing I do want to follow up on. In my last update, I shared with you guys how my water change routine. For anyone that's new, you know, I maintain this tank with water changes. 3 water changes a week is my goal. You know, 3 5-gallon water changes, usually the beginning of the week, middle of the week, and the end of the week. Now, this last couple of weeks gotten really busy, and I missed a week of changes. For anyone that understands reef tank and chemistry, you know, it's a bad thing messing up your routine like that. And my alkalinity was the consequence of that. So my alkalinity ended up dropping, you know, below 6. And my plan is, you know, I'm still looking into dosing, but in the meantime, the immediate fix was water changes, guys. You know, as I said before, water, and it got the job done. So 3 consecutive water changes every other day, and my alkalinity is back up to 7.4. So I'm back right where I need to be as far as natural seawater. Not where I want to be. I actually want it closer to 9 to give me some more wiggle room, but this definitely will buy me some time, you know, until I get my dosing situation figured out. You know, if I'm going to do 2-part or, you know, baking soda or whatever the case may be, there's a million different dosing options. I'm doing my homework and researching which one's going to be best for me. So in a nutshell, you know, I'm happy to say that I was able to resolve that small alkalinity swing issue and, you know, sticking on top of my routine, making sure I don't slack on it. It's going to be the immediate fix, but it's not going to be the long-term solution for my new schedule and situation. So just want to share that with you guys for anyone that was curious. And as you can tell, no serious negative effects have happened. You know, no corals have died or melted. Happy to say that. And that's pretty much where I'm at today with the reef tank. Now, I do want to point out one major change I just made. If you guys haven't noticed it yet, it's regarding that green finger leather coral. You know, of course, earlier in the vid, I had to rescue it. And it's still in the tank. It's on the sandbed in the back. I'm going to trade it in as soon as I get a second to get to the LFS. But it gives you guys an idea of my whole reason for removing it now. Take a look at the middle of the tank. It's a clear, defined valley at this point. And it really, I'm really seeing what negative space and and actually removing some corals for your tank can actually help the way your tank looks. So at this point, using the rule of thirds, coral placement is key, to help complement my scape and not overrun or ruin the way I want it to look. And that's my goal moving forward, really specific with my coral placement. My tank's small already. It's completely, full of corals as it is. And I don't want to, take away from the way I want it to look. So that's the plan. I'm going to add a few more pieces to that pillar on the right, maybe fill in a few corals. But as far as that defined valley in the middle of the system, I'm not going to mess with it anymore. So other than that, I think it's a good stopping point. So, hey, if you guys have any questions, drop it down below. And as always, hey, you guys like, comment, subscribe. You guys do what y'all do. Y'all be easy and happy reefing. Peace.